When Emma was 10 years old, her life changed in a way she never expected. For many years, she had lived alone with her father after her mother passed away. Those years were quiet, sometimes sad, but filled with a gentle kind of love. Emma and her father, Daniel, were close. He was busy with his business, of course. He was a well-known, wealthy man who seemed to always be on the phone talking about meetings, deals, and investments. But no matter how busy he was, he made sure Emma felt safe. Their little routines, morning breakfast together, evening walks, short talks before bedtime were enough for Emma. She missed her mother, but she felt her father was doing his best. Everything began to shift when her father met Victoria. Victoria was elegant. That was the first thing Emma noticed when she saw her. Her clothes were perfect, her hair never out of place, and she moved as if she had practiced every step in front of a mirror. Her smile was small and polite, not warm, yet people still seemed impressed by her. Emma didn't know what to think of her at first. She simply accepted her father's happiness because she wanted him to be happy. After all, for so long he had seemed lonely. Soon, Daniel and Victoria got married. It happened faster than Emma could understand. 1 month they were dating, the next, plans for a wedding had already begun. Emma felt a mix of excitement and worry. She wondered if Victoria would like her. She hoped she would. She tried her best to behave politely, answer questions correctly, and not be a burden. Once the wedding was over, Emma and her father moved into Victoria's large mansion. The house was beautiful. It had tall windows that let in soft sunlight, shining over decorated furniture, golden frames, and polished floors. Everything looked expensive and perfect, almost like a museum. But for Emma, the mansion did not feel like home. It felt too big, too quiet, and too cold. Still, she tried to adjust. Victoria gave Emma a room on the second floor, a large one painted in soft cream colors with a bed that felt too big for a 10-year-old girl. At first, Emma was happy. The room looked pretty, almost like something from a fairy tale. But afterward she realized Victoria rarely visited her, rarely spoke to her unless necessary. The room felt more like a hotel space than a part of a family home. In the first few weeks, Emma watched Victoria carefully, hoping to find warmth in her. Victoria wasn't openly cruel, but she wasn't kind either. She gave Emma rules, many rules: don't run in the halls, don't touch anything without permission, always sit up straight, practice piano daily, be quiet during her meetings. Emma followed each rule, afraid of disappointing her new stepmother. Daniel noticed none of this, or maybe he saw it and decided not to think too much about it. He believed Victoria was simply trying to bring structure into Emma's life, something he himself struggled to maintain due to his busy work schedule. He trusted Victoria completely, convinced that she could help Emma become her best self, as he often said. At this point, Emma still hoped things would improve. She believed that once Victoria got used to having a child in the house, she would relax and maybe even show affection. Sometimes, Emma imagined Victoria brushing her hair, laughing with her, or teaching her something fun like baking or gardening. She dreamed of a mother-daughter type bond, the kind she used to have with her own mother. But these warm moments never came. Instead, Victoria seemed to watch Emma with a quiet, sharp expression, like she was judging her, measuring her, expecting something. Emma didn't know what that something was. She only felt nervous around her, like one wrong move would cause trouble. One evening, Emma sat quietly in the living room while Victoria flipped through a magazine. Emma nervously asked, "Do you want to hear me play the piano?" Hoping maybe music would make Victoria smile. Her mother had always loved listening to her play. Maybe Victoria would too. Victoria looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly, not with anger but calculation. "You can play?" she asked. "Yes," Emma said softly. "My mom taught me." Victoria put down the magazine. "Show me." Emma moved to the piano in the corner of the room. It was a grand piano, shiny and elegant. Her fingers touched the keys gently and she played a simple melody, one she had practiced since she was 6. When she finished, she turned to look at Victoria, hoping for approval. Victoria didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. Instead, she said something that would change Emma's life. "You have talent, real talent, but you're sloppy. With practice, you could become exceptional." Emma didn't know what to say, she simply nodded. That moment was the beginning of something she was not prepared for, something that would take over her days, her hands, and eventually her peace. For now, though, Emma only wanted one thing: to fit into this new family, to make her father proud, and to believe that this new beginning was truly a good one. She had no idea that behind Victoria's calm eyes was a strict, perfection-driven nature that would soon push her far beyond her limits. At this stage, Emma still hoped for love. She still believed in new beginnings. She didn't yet know how quickly hope can turn into fear when the wrong person is in control. Days turned into weeks, and Emma slowly started understanding the true personality of her stepmother, Victoria. On the surface, Victoria looked calm, controlled, and well-mannered. She dressed perfectly, spoke gently, and carried herself like a woman who always knew what she wanted. But underneath that polished exterior, there was something sharper, an obsession with perfection that grew stronger each day. Victoria came from a world where appearances mattered more than feelings. She cared about reputation, elegance, and what people whispered behind closed doors. She believed that success was not just earned but displayed, like a trophy on a shelf. And when she realized that Emma could play the piano, even just a little, she saw an opportunity. Not for Emma's growth, not for her happiness, but for her own pride. Emma had always loved the piano, but she played it for comfort, not competition. For her, music was something gentle, something that reminded her of her mother's soft encouragement. But now, the meaning of piano in her life began to change. One morning, Victoria entered Emma's room holding a notebook. Her steps were sharp, her voice more commanding than usual. "From today," she said, placing the notebook on Emma's desk, "you will follow a strict piano schedule. If you want to be good, you must work hard." Emma didn't understand. She thought piano was something she practiced when she felt like it, not a duty. Victoria opened the notebook and showed Emma the page. It had a full schedule written in neat handwriting. 2 hours in the mornings, 2 hours in the afternoons, 1 hour in the evenings. Emma's heart sank. 5 hours, she whispered. Victoria didn't blink. Prodigies practice even more. What? Emma wanted to protest, but Victoria's expression warned her not to. She simply nodded, trying not to look overwhelmed. At first, Emma tried to follow the schedule quietly. She believed Victoria was strict because she wanted her to improve. She didn't want to cause trouble. She wanted to be a good daughter, a good girl. But soon the pressure grew heavier. Victoria began sitting with Emma during practice, watching her closely. She didn't hum along to the music. She didn't smile when Emma played well. Instead, she listened for mistakes, small ones, tiny ones, notes that were slightly too soft or too loud. And when Emma made one, Victoria tapped her fingernails on the piano lid sharply. "Again," she would say. Emma would restart. "Another mistake." Again. And again. Sometimes Emma felt like she played the same piece dozens of times. Her fingers grew stiff, her shoulders tired, but she continued because Victoria's eyes on her felt like a command she couldn't refuse. Slowly, Emma began to feel afraid of the piano. The comforting instrument that once brought her joy now felt like a punishment waiting to happen. Whenever her father came home, Emma wanted to tell him how hard the lessons had become. But every time she opened her mouth, Victoria appeared behind him with a smile and said, "Emma is doing wonderfully. She's improving every day." Daniel believed her, he trusted her. He had no reason to question her intentions, and he was too busy to notice the sadness in Emma's eyes. One evening, after a long practice session, Emma's fingers were red and slightly swollen. She tried to hide her hands when Victoria walked by, but Victoria noticed instantly. "What happened to your hands?" she demanded. Emma hesitated. "They hurt a little." Victoria lifted one eyebrow. "Pain is normal. It means you're pushing yourself, don't be dramatic." Emma lowered her head. She wanted comfort, but Victoria offered none. Later that night, while Emma lay in bed, she thought of her mother. Her mother had always told her, music should feel like breathing, not like pressure. Emma felt tears slide down her cheeks. She was practicing harder than she ever had, but she no longer felt joy. Victoria's obsession grew stronger as the weeks passed. She started reading articles about piano competitions, famous child musicians, and awards. She watched videos of young piano prodigies and imagined Emma becoming one of them. In her mind, it would bring fame to the family, respect from society, and more attention for her. She didn't care whether Emma's heart was in it. She only cared about the performance. One day, Victoria invited her high society friends over for tea. Emma was forced to dress nicely and perform a piece in front of them. Victoria introduced her proudly, saying, "Emma has real talent. With proper discipline, she could become extraordinary." Emma stood in front of the piano nervous. Her hands trembled slightly, but she played anyway. When she finished, the women clapped softly, complimenting Victoria, not Emma. "She's lucky to have such a dedicated mother," one of them said. Victoria smiled proudly as if she had achieved something great. But Emma didn't feel lucky. She felt trapped, caught between her father's absence and Victoria's impossible expectations. Little by little, she began to understand that Victoria didn't care about her as a child or a daughter. She cared only about the image of success, a perfect family, a talented stepdaughter, and admiration from society. Emma's world was changing fast. And though she didn't know it yet, this obsession of Victoria's was only the beginning of something much harder, something that would test her strength in ways she never imagined. The days of gentle piano lessons were now completely gone. In their place came long, exhausting hours that felt more like punishment than music. Emma woke up each morning with a knot in her stomach, already knowing what the day would bring. The piano, once her friend, now felt like a heavy shadow that followed her everywhere. Victoria's schedule was strict and unchanging. Even if Emma felt tired, ill, or simply needed a break, Victoria never allowed it. Talent requires discipline, she would say in her sharp, perfect voice. You will thank me one day. But Emma didn't feel thankful, she felt scared. Each morning began the same way. She sat in front of the grand piano, her feet barely touching the floor, and placed her small fingers on the cold keys. Victoria sat beside her or stood behind her with crossed arms, watching every move. Mistakes were not tolerated. If Emma pressed a note too softly, Victoria clicked her tongue. If she paused for a second to rest her fingers, Victoria tapped the piano lid loudly. If she hesitated, Victoria said, "Do it again, you're not concentrating." Sometimes Emma practiced the same 4 measures of a piece over and over until she could barely feel her fingertips. By afternoon, her arms felt weak, her shoulders hurt, and her mind grew foggy from repetition. But the hardest part was not the practice, it was the fear. The moment she sat at the piano, she stopped being a child and became something Victoria wanted to shape and control. Emma tried to stay calm, focusing on the notes she had learned years ago, but the stress made her forget things she once knew well. The more nervous she became, the more mistakes she made. And the more mistakes she made, the harsher Victoria became. Again. The word echoed so many times in Emma's mind that sometimes she heard it even when Victoria wasn't speaking. There were moments when Emma felt her hands shaking from pain. The skin around her fingers turned red, and sometimes small patches became sore. When she accidentally winced during practice, Victoria's eyes narrowed. Pain is a sign of weakness, Emma. If you want to be exceptional, you must push through it. Emma didn't want to be exceptional, she just wanted to breathe. She wanted to play the piano like she used to with joy, with memories of her mother's soft humming. But those days felt so far away now. Sometimes Emma glanced toward the door, wishing her father would walk in and see how hard Victoria was pushing her. She imagined him saying, "That's enough, let her rest." She imagined him noticing the swollen, trembling fingers or the sadness in her eyes. But Daniel was rarely home. And even when he was, Victoria made sure Emma's struggles stayed hidden. Whenever he entered the room, Victoria's tone instantly softened. "Oh, Emma is doing wonderfully," she would say. "She's improving every day. She'll make us proud." Daniel believed every word. He thought Victoria was helping Emma grow. He didn't see the way the little girl's smile never reached her eyes anymore. One evening, after a particularly long session, Emma accidentally dropped her hand onto the keys from exhaustion, creating a loud, unplanned sound. Victoria stiffened. "Do you think this is a joke?" she snapped. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Sorry doesn't fix anything." Again. Emma swallowed her tears and lifted her hands back onto the keyboard. Her fingers were trembling so badly that they slipped on some keys. Victoria's jaw tightened. "You are being careless." "I'm not, I'm just tired," Emma said softly. Victoria leaned down, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. "If you complain again, I'll increase your practice hours. Do you understand?" Emma nodded quickly, terrified. Victoria walked away, but her words stayed in the air like a heavy cloud. That night when Emma finally returned to her room, she lay on her bed and stared at her hands. They looked tired, slightly swollen, and pink at the joints. She tried to wiggle her fingers, but they felt stiff. She wondered if hands could get worn out like old piano keys, and if hers would ever feel normal again. She missed her mother more than ever. She wished someone could hold her and tell her she didn't need to be perfect, she just needed to be herself. But in this house, perfection was demanded, not earned, and mistakes were treated like failures. Emma didn't know how much longer she could continue like this. She didn't know how to explain her pain to her father or how to stand up against Victoria's impossible expectations. All she knew was that every day felt harder than the last, and the piano, the instrument she once loved, had become the thing she feared most. Still, she practiced. She practiced because she had no choice. She practiced because she wanted peace. She practiced because a small part of her hoped that if she played well enough, maybe Victoria would finally be satisfied, and maybe the pressure would stop. But deep inside, Emma already sensed the truth. This was only the beginning. Daniel had always been a busy man, but after his marriage to Victoria, his work seemed to consume him even more. Meetings, business trips, charity events, and important gatherings filled his calendar from morning until night. He believed that providing a luxurious life for his family was the most important thing he could do. In his mind, money solved everything: comfort, security, happiness. But he didn't realize that while he was building his empire, his daughter was slowly breaking under the pressure inside their home. To Daniel, Victoria looked like the perfect wife. She kept the house immaculate, managed social events gracefully, and presented herself with poise everywhere they went. She always spoke highly of him in public and carried herself like a woman who had everything under control. He admired her confidence and trusted her judgment deeply. So whenever she told him that Emma's piano lessons were necessary or that discipline builds character, he didn't question her. In his eyes, Emma was simply going through a phase of hard work that would help her grow. He never imagined the truth. Whenever he passed by the piano room, usually late in the day, Emma was seated with perfect posture, playing smoothly through a piece she had practiced 100 times. Victoria always made sure he saw these perfect moments. She timed them, she controlled them, and she greeted him with a proud smile every single time. "See how much she's improving, Daniel," Victoria would say. "She's becoming more confident, it's good for her." Daniel would smile, pat Emma's head gently and say, "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." Emma forced herself to smile back, even though silence clung to her like a weight. She couldn't tell him the truth. Every time she tried, Victoria was there, watching, listening, controlling. There was one evening, however, when Emma almost found the courage to speak. Her father had returned earlier than usual, exhausted but cheerful. He sat on the couch and called Emma over. "How's school?" he asked warmly. Emma hesitated, her fingers still hurting from hours of practice. "It's fine." "And the piano? You still enjoying it?" Her heart sank. She wanted to say no, she wanted to cry. She wanted him to see her pain without her needing to beg for help. Before she could answer, Victoria entered the room with a tray of drinks. "Emma is doing wonderfully," she said smoothly. "I've taken personal responsibility to help her practice. She's dedicated, aren't you, darling?" Emma lowered her eyes and nodded automatically. Daniel smiled proudly, unaware of the fear behind her silence. Victoria's influence over Daniel was subtle but powerful. She knew exactly what to say to make herself appear nurturing and supportive. She convinced him that her strict rules were necessary, that Emma needed structure, that music would open doors for her future. Daniel trusted her completely, but he didn't see the signs he should have noticed. Emma's fingers were sometimes red and swollen. She walked slower because her arms ached from hours of sitting stiffly. Her eyes looked tired, as if she hadn't slept well in days. Her laughter, once bright and soft, faded into rare, quiet smiles. Still, Daniel believed Emma was adjusting well. He had no reason to suspect that the woman he loved was pushing his daughter beyond her emotional and physical limits. Victoria used Daniel's absence and ambition to her advantage. Whenever Emma made a mistake during practice, Victoria would remind her, "Your father expects you to succeed. Do you want to disappoint him? Well, he works hard for you, you must work hard too." Emma took those words to heart. She didn't want to burden her father. She didn't want him to think she was ungrateful. So she continued practicing, even when her hands trembled, even when tears blurred the keys in front of her. One afternoon, when Daniel returned from a business trip, he found Emma asleep at the piano, her head resting on her arms. The room was quiet except for her slow breathing. Her small fingers were still placed on the keys as if she had fallen asleep while playing. Daniel felt a tug of concern. He walked closer and gently touched her shoulder. Emma woke up suddenly, startled. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "why are you sleeping here? You should be in bed." Before Emma could speak, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "She must have been practicing and got tired," she said calmly. "It shows her dedication." Daniel nodded, interpreting the moment as something admirable rather than troubling. He didn't see the sadness in Emma's eyes. He didn't notice the way she hid her hands behind her back. Instead, he said, "I'm proud of you, keep working hard." Emma nodded again. That night, Emma lay awake thinking about her father's words. They were meant to comfort her, but instead they made her feel even more trapped. She wanted to tell him everything, but she feared he would take Victoria's side. And deep down, she didn't want to be the reason they fought. She didn't want to be a problem. Daniel loved Emma deeply, but he was blinded by his trust in Victoria and his belief in discipline and success. He had no idea that the pressure in the house was slowly teaching Emma to suffer in silence. He didn't know that the piano, once a symbol of love, had become the symbol of her pain. He didn't know that his silence, though unintentional, was hurting her too. And Emma didn't know how much longer she could hide the truth. As the weeks passed, Emma's life became a cycle she could no longer escape. Wake up, practice, eat quickly, practice again, rest briefly, then return to the piano until her fingers felt numb. Each day blended into the next, and the piano room, once her favorite place, felt like a cage built from keys, pressure, and fear. Victoria's rules tightened more and more. She monitored Emma like a strict teacher who never found anything good enough. Whenever Emma played a passage correctly, Victoria simply nodded without praise. But when Emma slipped even slightly, Victoria's voice turned sharp. "That was sloppy. You're not trying hard enough. Again, start from the beginning." Emma tried, she truly tried, but the more afraid she became, the more mistakes she made. Fear stole her confidence and exhaustion made her hands clumsy. And every mistake brought harsher criticism. One afternoon, as Emma was practicing a fast piece, her left hand cramped. The muscles tightened suddenly, causing her to hit the wrong note. She gasped softly from the sting. Victoria stepped forward instantly. "Why did you stop?" "My hand, it hurts," Emma whispered. Victoria folded her arms. "Pain means improvement. Professionals don't complain every time something hurts." "But it really..." Again, Victoria interrupted. Emma lowered her head and continued. The pain remained, but she forced her fingers to move. She didn't want to make Victoria angry. She didn't want her father to think she wasn't trying. Her hands grew worse over the next few days. Red spots appeared on her fingertips and the skin felt warm and swollen. Sometimes she had trouble holding her fork at dinner. But she hid her discomfort, hoping the pain would disappear by itself. It didn't. One morning, while moving her fingers gently, she winced without meaning to. Victoria noticed immediately. "What is that?" she asked sharply. Emma froze. "Then nothing." Victoria grabbed her hand, examining the redness. "This is from bad technique. If you played correctly, this wouldn't happen. It means you need more practice, not less." Emma felt her heart drop. More practice was the last thing she could handle, but Victoria increased her hours anyway. Now, instead of 5 hours a day, Emma practiced almost 7. Victoria justified it by saying Emma needed to catch up to other young pianists. Emma didn't even know who these other children were, yet she felt like she was constantly competing against invisible enemies. She rarely saw her father now. Whenever he came home, Emma was practicing. Whenever she finished, he was already leaving for a meeting. Their conversations became shorter and more distant. Daniel only saw the version of Emma that Victoria wanted him to see. A quiet, hardworking girl who was improving under strict guidance. He didn't see the trembling hands she hid behind her back. He didn't see the fear in her eyes when Victoria stood behind her. He didn't see the tears she wiped away quickly before he entered the room. One evening, after hours of practice, Emma made a mistake so small that she barely noticed it, but Victoria did. She slammed her hand on the piano lid, making Emma jump. "Are you even paying attention? That was careless." "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, holding back tears. "You're not sorry, you're lazy," Victoria snapped. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Nobody had ever called her lazy before. She practiced until she could barely move. How could she be lazy? Victoria pointed to the piano bench. "Sit properly. We are doing that section again." Emma nodded weakly. The bench felt harder than usual, and the keys seemed to blur slightly as she stared at them. Her fingers felt heavy, stiff. She lifted her hands and tried once more. Her right hand hit the correct notes, but her left refused to move smoothly. It trembled, and she struck the wrong key again. And again. This time, Emma couldn't stop the tears. One dropped onto the keys, leaving a tiny wet mark. "Stop crying," Victoria ordered. "Crying wastes time." Emma wiped her eyes quickly, but her vision remained blurry. "You are embarrassing yourself," Victoria continued. "If your father saw you like this, he would be disappointed." What? Those words pierced Emma's heart more deeply than any scolding before. She wanted so badly to make her father proud, to show him she wasn't a burden. Victoria knew exactly how to use that fear against her. Emma continued practicing until her fingers felt like they were burning. The room felt hot, tight, suffocating. When Victoria finally dismissed her, Emma hurried to her room and closed the door softly behind her. She sat on her bed, staring at her hands. They were swollen again, and faint red circles marked where the pressure had been worst. She tried moving her fingers, but it hurt too much. She whispered to herself, "Why am I not good enough?" That night she didn't sleep well. She dreamed about endless piano keys stretching into darkness, her hands bleeding as she tried to keep up. She woke up shaking, breathless, but morning still arrived, and so did practice time. Emma didn't tell anyone how scared she was. She didn't tell anyone how much it hurt. She kept everything inside because she believed she had no choice. Victoria controlled the house, controlled her father's beliefs, controlled her schedule, and now she was controlling Emma's mind too. Emma felt trapped in a world where her pain didn't matter, her voice didn't matter, and her dreams were ignored. She didn't know how to escape, and she didn't even know if escape was possible. All she knew was that the music she once loved had turned into chains she couldn't break, and the days ahead were only becoming harder. Emma's world grew smaller with each passing day. The mansion was big, full of long hallways, tall ceilings, and polished rooms, but to Emma it felt like there were only 2 places she was allowed to exist: the piano room and her bedroom. Everywhere else felt like walking on thin ice, afraid of upsetting Victoria's perfect order. By now, Emma's hands hurt almost constantly. Sometimes, even when she wasn't practicing, her fingers twitched or throbbed as if they were begging her to stop. But stopping wasn't an option. Whenever she slowed down, looked tired, or tried to take a break, Victoria's sharp voice pulled her back. No excuses. No stopping. No weaknesses. Emma tried to ignore the pain, but it was getting worse. When she woke up, her fingers were stiff. When she played, they burned. At night, she rubbed them gently, hoping the soreness would fade before morning. It never did. Still, she kept practicing. She had learned that arguing only made things worse. Victoria's expectations increased with every improvement Emma made. If she mastered one piece, Victoria chose a harder one. If she played smoothly, Victoria demanded more emotion, more control, more speed. Emma was trapped in an endless staircase, forced to climb higher every day with no rest, and Daniel still didn't know. Victoria made sure of that. She controlled what he saw and what he heard. When he came home early, a rare event, she always arranged it so Emma was resting or practicing something simple that she could play cleanly, even when tired. Victoria acted like a supportive mother who was raising a talented young musician. And Daniel, exhausted from work, believed her. But small signs were beginning to appear, signs that even Victoria couldn't completely hide. One evening, Daniel noticed Emma eating slowly at dinner. She held her fork awkwardly, switching hands constantly because gripping it felt painful. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Daniel asked gently. Emma froze. Victoria's eyes were locked on her from across the table. "I'm fine," Emma said quickly, forcing a smile. Daniel didn't look convinced. "Your hands, are they hurting you?" Forcing a smile, Daniel didn't look convinced. "Your hands, are they hurting you?" Emma hesitated. Her heart begged her to tell the truth. Her throat tightened. This was her chance, maybe her only chance, but before she could speak, Victoria answered for her. "She's just adjusting to longer practice sessions. A little soreness is normal, she'll be fine." Daniel looked uncertain. "Maybe we should slow things down a bit." "No," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "Slowing down now will ruin her progress. You want her to succeed, don't you?" Daniel sat back, overwhelmed by work and unsure of himself. He wanted to help Emma, but he didn't want to interfere if Victoria truly believed this was necessary. He trusted her. He wanted to trust her. So he nodded even though something in his heart felt unsettled. Emma's hope faded. Later that night, Victoria visited Emma's room. "You almost embarrassed us," she said in a cold whisper. "I didn't mean to," Emma whispered. "You never mean to, but you must learn to control yourself. Do not mention your hands again. Understand?" Emma nodded, tears forming but not falling. She couldn't cry in front of Victoria. She learned that long ago. The next day, practice was especially hard. Victoria introduced a new piece, fast, complicated, and full of difficult transitions. It was far beyond Emma's current level, but Victoria insisted she could handle it. "You have potential," she said, "but you're wasting it by being emotional." Emma tried her best. She played the first few measures, hesitated, then started again. The jumps were too wide, the tempo too fast. Her fingers stumbled, her hands shook. After 2 hours, she still couldn't get past the same section. Victoria grew increasingly irritated. "Again," she ordered, pacing behind Emma like a frustrated coach. Emma took a deep breath and tried once more. Her left hand cramped sharply and she hit the wrong note again. This time she gasped in pain. Victoria slammed her hand on the piano lid. "Emma, how many times must I repeat myself?" "What?" I can't," Emma whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "It hurts too much." Victoria grabbed her wrist, examining the swollen joints. "Stop crying, you are making a scene." "What?" "It hurts," Emma repeated softly, almost apologetically. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Fine, if you cannot play properly sitting down, we will try a different method." Emma didn't understand, but she soon would. Victoria made her stand and do finger exercises repeatedly, stretching, bending, pressing until her knuckles turned pink. Emma whimpered, but Victoria continued. "This is for your own good," she snapped. "Pain builds strength." "What?" But it wasn't building strength, it was breaking Emma. By evening, Emma could barely move her fingers at all. When Daniel came home, she kept her hands hidden behind her back. She didn't want him to worry. She didn't want Victoria to get angry. She didn't want more conflict, but Daniel noticed anyway. "Sweetheart, why are you holding your hands like that?" he asked gently. Emma froze. Victoria appeared instantly, smiling too quickly. "She's just tired," she said. "Long day." Emma swallowed hard. Her father looked at her with concern, but Emma only nodded silently. She was too afraid to speak. Daniel patted her head softly, still unsure. "All right, rest well, okay." "What?" Emma forced a smile. But inside, she felt herself slowly slipping away, emotionally, mentally, physically. She didn't know how much more she could endure. She didn't know how to ask for help. She felt small, fragile, and alone. She felt trapped in a house that looked beautiful on the outside, but was full of fear on the inside. And her hands, the very hands her mother once held with pride, were now becoming symbols of her suffering. Little did she know, everything was about to reach a breaking point. The breaking point began quietly, on a morning that looked just like every other. The sunlight came through the tall windows of the mansion, but to Emma, the brightness felt harsh, almost painful. Her hands were swollen again when she woke up. Even bending her fingers slightly made her wince. She sat up in bed slowly, wishing she could stay under the blankets just a little longer, but she knew she couldn't. Victoria didn't tolerate delays. Emma dragged herself out of bed and dressed carefully so her sleeves covered part of her hands. Maybe if Victoria didn't look too closely, she wouldn't notice. Maybe today would be easier. But deep inside, Emma knew nothing was ever easy anymore. When she entered the piano room, Victoria was already there, standing perfectly straight with her arms crossed. She didn't greet Emma. She didn't ask if she had slept well. She simply pointed at the piano bench and said, "Sit, we're behind schedule." Emma obeyed quietly. The moment her fingers touched the keys, she felt a sharp sting shoot up her hand. She bit her lip, trying not to react. If she showed pain, Victoria would only push harder. Victoria set a metronome on the piano. The ticking sound filled the room like a clock counting down to something terrible. "Begin," she commanded. Emma played slowly at first, but Victoria immediately shook her head. "Faster, you must keep up." Emma tried, but her fingers weren't cooperating. Every note felt heavy, every movement felt like lifting something painful. She pushed through the discomfort, but after a few measures, her left hand cramped violently. She gasped and pulled her hand away instinctively. Victoria's voice cut the air like a blade. "Back to position." I can't," Emma whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "My hand, it's hurting too much." Victoria's expression tightened with irritation, not concern. "You are being dramatic." "I'm not," Emma said softly. "Please, I can't move it." Victoria walked over, grabbed Emma's left hand, and examined it with impatience. The skin was swollen, warm, and slightly reddish. She frowned, but not out of worry. "This is your fault, not the piano's," she said sharply. "You're not practicing correctly. If you were focused, this wouldn't happen." Emma shook her head desperately. "I am trying." "Not enough," Victoria cut her off. Emma felt tears fall, but she wiped them quickly. Crying only made Victoria angrier. Victoria stepped back and said the words Emma feared the most. "You will continue, now." Emma looked at the piano keys, blurry through her tears. She lifted her hand slowly, but the pain shot up again. She placed her fingers on the keys anyway, trembling. She pushed down a single note. A sharp, unbearable pain exploded through her hand. She gasped loudly and grabbed her wrist with her other hand, unable to hide it anymore. Victoria lost patience. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Do you want to throw away all the work we've done? Do you want to disappoint your father?" Emma froze. That sentence always froze her. She didn't want to disappoint him. She didn't want him to think she was weak. She didn't want to cause trouble, but she couldn't move her fingers. For the first time, she whispered words she had been too scared to say. "I don't want to play anymore." Victoria's entire expression changed. Her eyes widened in shock, then hardened in anger. "What did you just say?" she demanded. Emma's voice shook. I can't do this, it hurts too much." Victoria stepped closer, towering over her like a shadow. "You don't get to decide that, Emma. You don't get to quit. You are going to play whether you like it or not." Emma felt trapped, completely helpless. Her breath started to shake. Her chest tightened. She felt like she wasn't getting enough air. The room seemed to shrink. The piano keys blurred. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She was having a panic attack, but she didn't know what that was. She only knew she felt terrified and unable to breathe. She stood up quickly, backing away from the piano. "Please, please stop, I can't." Victoria grabbed her arm firmly. "You will practice." "No," Emma cried, pulling away desperately for the first time. Victoria stared at her in disbelief. Emma, quiet, obedient Emma, had never defied her before. Her anger boiled. "You ungrateful child," she hissed. "I'm doing all of this for you. You have no idea how lucky you are." Emma felt her heart break at those words. Lucky? She felt anything but lucky. She could barely stand from the pain and fear, and then something unexpected happened. Daniel walked into the room. He froze instantly at the sight, Victoria gripping Emma's arm tightly, Emma crying and shaking, her hand swollen and red. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Daniel's face changed in a way Emma had never seen before, shock, confusion, anger, and concern all at once. "What is going on here?" he demanded. Victoria's grip loosened immediately. She straightened her posture and said quickly, "She's just being dramatic. She didn't want to practice." But Daniel didn't look at her. His eyes were on his daughter. Her swollen hands, her tear-streaked face, her trembling breath. "Emma," he whispered, "sweetheart, what happened to your hands?" Emma opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't know whether she should speak the truth or stay silent out of fear. Her heart pounded painfully. Daniel stepped closer and gently lifted her hand. The swelling was undeniable. And for the first time, Daniel truly saw the pain his daughter was hiding. He looked at Victoria, his expression darkening. But Emma didn't hear what they said next. Because for the first time in a long time, she felt something she thought she had lost. Hope. The room fell silent after Daniel lifted Emma's swollen hand. For a moment, everything around them seemed to stop. The ticking metronome, the heavy breathing, even the sunlight on the polished floor. Emma felt as if the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Daniel's face grew pale as he carefully turned her wrist, studying the redness and swelling. He had seen tiredness on her face before, but he had never seen this kind of pain. This wasn't a little soreness, and it wasn't normal. It was harm, real, undeniable harm. "Emma," he said softly, his voice shaking slightly, "why didn't you tell me?" Emma opened her mouth, but fear made her throat tight. She looked at Victoria, who stood behind Daniel with her arms folded and her expression stiff. Emma's heart beat painfully in her chest. I tried, she whispered, barely audible. Daniel looked confused. When? Emma swallowed hard, but Victoria, she said, I shouldn't complain. The truth slipped out before she could stop it. Her breath caught, frightened by her own honesty. Victoria stepped forward instantly. Daniel, she is exaggerating. She always cries when she doesn't want to work. She is just... Daniel raised his hand to stop her. Not violently, not angrily, just firmly. Victoria, enough, he said quietly. That simple sentence changed everything. For the first time since she had entered Victoria's house, Emma felt the smallest flicker of safety. Her father wasn't ignoring her pain anymore. He was seeing it, truly seeing it. Daniel knelt so he was at eye level with Emma. How long has this been happening? He asked gently. Tears filled Emma's eyes. She didn't want to betray anyone. She didn't want to cause a fight, but she also couldn't carry this burden anymore. A long time, she whispered. My hands hurt every day, I practice all the time, and I don't want to play anymore, I can't. Her voice cracked in the last few words, the weight of months pouring out all at once. Daniel's face softened with heartbreak. He brushed a tear from her cheek. Oh, sweetheart, you should have told me sooner. Emma looked down. I was scared. Those words were the final thread holding Daniel's patience together. He stood up slowly and turned toward Victoria. What is this? He asked in a low, controlled voice. What have you been doing to her? Victoria stiffened. I've been disciplining her. You told me you wanted her to succeed. You said you trusted my judgment. Daniel shook his head, anger rising. Discipline is not abuse. Look at her hands, look at her. Victoria crossed her arms defensively. If she wants to be a musician, she must push herself. She's a child, Daniel snapped. My child. Emma flinched at the tension but couldn't look away. This was the first time her father was standing between her and Victoria. Victoria's voice rose. You're overreacting. This is what real training looks like. You're coddling her. Daniel stepped closer, his voice firm and cold. Training does not leave a child shaking and in tears. Training does not injure her. You hid this from me. I didn't hide anything, Victoria lied smoothly, but Daniel saw right through her. He took a deep breath, then said the words Emma had prayed to hear for months. Emma will not be practicing anymore, not with you. What? Victoria's eyes widened. Excuse me. You heard me, Daniel said. No more lessons, no more schedules, no more pressure. It ends now. Emma felt her knees weaken with relief. Her tears fell silently, but for the first time they weren't tears of fear, only emotion, release, and exhaustion. Victoria's voice sharpened. You're making a huge mistake. You're letting her laziness ruin her future. Daniel's jaw tightened. Her future is not yours to control. Emma had never seen her father so firm, so protective. The courage in his voice made her chest ache in a strange, warm way. Victoria, realizing she was losing control, tried one last time. Daniel, you're choosing her side over mine. Daniel looked at his daughter, then back at the woman who had pretended to care. She is my child, he said simply. I will always choose her. Victoria stood frozen, furious yet powerless. Daniel lifted Emma into his arms gently, careful of her hands. She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling safer than she had in a long time. He carried her out of the piano room, away from the rigid schedules, away from the constant fear, away from the piano that had turned into a symbol of suffering. Once they reached her bedroom, he sat on the edge of the bed and held her close. No more pain, he whispered. No more pushing, you're safe now. Emma closed her eyes, letting out a deep, shaky breath she didn't know she'd been holding for months. For the next few days, Daniel stayed home, watching over Emma, giving her time to rest. He took her to a doctor, who confirmed her hands needed time to heal. He read with her, talked with her, and slowly rebuilt the bond that had been slipping away. Victoria stayed distant, aware that the truth had finally come out. The control she once held had shattered. Her relationship with Daniel grew colder every day. She had pushed too far and lost. As Emma's hands healed, her spirit began to heal too. She still loved music, but she didn't touch the piano for a long time. And when she finally did, weeks later, it wasn't because someone forced her. It was because she wanted to. And this time the music felt like breathing again, soft, comforting, and free. Emma was no longer trapped. She had her father back. She had her voice back. And the pain that once ruled her life slowly became a memory she had survived. Her life slowly became a memory she had survived.